Hey everyone. Okay, welcome to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle podcast with your host Sylvie, and I am extremely excited to bring this amazing lady to our episode. This is the one and only Jennifer Sage. Now, I'm going to share, she's sitting in Vail, Colorado, and I think I might just have to go visit her and do some skiing at some point in time,
or cycling. There's some great riding here.
But I heard you can do both in one day. Can you do both in one day?
I do know people who do, but I'm a fair weather skier and I'm a fair weather cyclist, so
wouldn't find me. It's got to be perfect. Yeah. But Jen's background. Okay, so I'll give you a little background on her. I met Jen in between 2004 and 2009. This is when I had a spinning studio, and Jen was a master instructor for Mad Dog Athletics, Schwinn, Johnny G, that whole era.
Not Schwinn, just Mad Dog.
Just Mad Dog. Mad Dog on Schwinn.
Spinning.
Oh, no, spin bikes. And so I used to go to the conferences every year, and Jen was one of the instructors. And in my studio, I used to hold certification courses and educational courses, and they would send a coach or instructor up to teach them. And Jen was one of them. And so we've been friends ever since, been on Facebook, touching base. Hey, how you doing? And since then, so that's a long time ago, since then, she left Mad Dog Athletics in 2009. I actually coincidentally closed my studio in 2009. And she went on and created another foundation called Indoor Cycling Association. So we're going to hear more about that. And she also had a company that did guided tours in Europe. So Jen, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here because, as you know, this is about cyclists and everybody who has anything to do with cycling that does something extraordinary, and just so excited to have you.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm thrilled to be here and talking about cycling. And indoor cycling is, do you have 10 hours? We can keep talking.
Really, how much do I love cycling?
Yeah.
So I always love to get started with asking, how did you get started? How did you get into cycling? Because everybody has a story, and everybody's story is kind of different. So what was your story like?
I actually remember the first time I rode a bike for a reason. I rode my bike to school in grade school. But so I remember the first time I rode my bike for a reason that wasn't just to get somewhere. I was in university in Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts. I only went my last 2 years. And I don't remember how I got the bike, but I borrowed a bike or I somehow acquired a bike. It was a Fuji. I do remember that. It was a black Fuji. Wow. And I went, and this was in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is in the middle of the state. It's flat and a lot of farmland. I was dating myself here, but it was mid-'80s.
That's okay.
Early 80s. And I just went out and rode. I think I was maybe out for a couple hours, but I may have even been in jeans. I don't know.
Probably if it was the 80s.
Also, I remember when I first got a pair of bike cycling shorts, I was like, oh, these are weird. But I do remember coming back and just going, oh my gosh, that was amazing. It flipped a switch in my head. And from that day forward, I considered myself a cyclist. So after I graduated, I moved to San Francisco, and that's where I really started riding, is in the hills north of San Francisco and south of San Francisco. I would put my bike in my car and go ride Woodside. If anyone knows San Francisco or Palo Alto, you go up into the mountains and then head down towards the coast. And
it's a great place to cycle, like a mecca.
Yeah. And then I've moved all over the world.
Oh, well, tell us
my
about
bike.
that. So what did you go
Well,
to
I say
school
move.
for?
Huh?
What did you go to school for?
Exercise physiology was my degree. And that's kind of what led me to where I ended up with fitness and teaching for spinning. But I kind of did that via a master's of international management. But and that kind of came from, because I decided 1988, I decided I'm going to ride my bike around Europe. Now, I had never ridden more than, I probably had gone out 4 or 5 hours. But I had heard about someone who did it. And I was at a very independent period of my life. And so I literally went to Europe with my bike in a box and the panniers without only once had I ever tried putting the panniers on. Like I landed in Paris.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
And I took my bike out of a cardboard box. I think I shoved the box somewhere, and I rode from Paris. I rode from the airport in Paris, and I had a rough plan. This is before GPS. This is before phones. This was 1988, and I rode 2,500 miles around Europe, around mostly France, because I spoke a little bit of French, and by the time I was done with this, I spoke more. And then across Switzerland into southern Germany, and then back into France. And it was 2 months. I did 5 weeks alone, and then the last 3 weeks, I had a friend flew out and joined me, and I much preferred the time alone.
That's funny. No, we should talk about that after.
Well, here's why. I kept sending her postcards because, again, this is before Facebook and messaging, and I was like, "You better be getting fit. I'm riding 100 kilometers a day." Was kind of like my average. Sometimes more, sometimes less. I'm climbing a lot. You better be getting fit. And she didn't. And so we were such different fitness levels. And
you didn't?
She didn't have the patience for me translating French. And it was just one of those things that
I got
also, when I was alone, I met more people, and I met so many amazing, amazing people. But when, like at a campground, when they see you, again, we camped the whole way too. Yeah. When they see you with 2 people, they're less likely to interact. But when I sat at my picnic table or my tent in a campground, people would come over and say, "Come join us."
Oh, I love that. Even
happened all the time. It was just the most amazing experience. So that was like my big thing, is like I rode my bike around Europe in 1988. And then in 1990, I know what it was. Not the Iraq War, the first Iraq War happened. And so just the economy, the United States was kind of weird. And I lost my job. I forget what it was. It was just some side thing. And I said, you know what?
I'm just going to go to Europe again.
I had miles on my credit card for, this is back, when the mileage for travel was good, when you get free flights. I remember calling like United Airlines and saying, "How many miles do I need to go to New Zealand?" And they said at the time, like 50,000. And I said, "How many miles do I have?" And they said 50,200. So like,
sign me up for a one-way trip.
It was a round trip. So I went to New Zealand.
Oh my gosh, really? Cool.
And rode my bike around the South Island by myself. And that was 1,500 miles. And that was a lot harder. Well, actually in Europe, I did go over some of the Alps, and that it was pretty challenging. But in New Zealand, I did all the big mountains in the South Island. And then when I was supposed to fly home, it was January, so I spent Christmas down there. I have family in New Zealand, so it was
cool.
My oldest brother moved to New Zealand. He's quite a bit older than me. He's a half brother, and he moved to New Zealand in 1970 to avoid the draft, and to go instead of going to Vietnam. And he married a New Zealand woman, and they have 5 kids and a dozen grandkids now. But he's been there ever since 1970. So I've been back a few times to see him. But that time I rode my bike, it was, if you ever have a chance to ride your bike in New Zealand, it is just stunning. So those
I've
are
seen pictures.
my big travel cycling stories. But because of my passion for France, I like I said, we could talk for 10 hours, but while I was there on my French trip, I'm going to keep this really short because it's got some fun parts to it and I could go off on a tangent. But I met a boy. And,
of course. At some point in time, I would hope that, you came across at least one. Oh, those campgrounds.
I actually met several. But when I flew back to California, after that trip, I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And I was keeping in touch with him.
Is that your husband?
No. Thank God. No, but he did want to marry me, and I broke his heart. But I came home from work one day. I was just working at a temp firm trying to figure out, what it was next. And there was a message on my voicemail that said, Jennifer, I have decided to come to San Francisco. I arrive tomorrow. And
oh my gosh.
So, because we had talked about me coming out to visit and maybe staying for a while and maybe going to school in France. But I couldn't. You need to get a student visa. You need to have proof that you have $3,000 in the bank. And obviously I spent all my money on my travels. And then you need a certificate, they call it a certificat de logement, which is a proof of housing.
Yeah.
So he said on his voicemail, he goes, I am bringing you $3,000 to put in your account. And I am bringing you a certificat de logement. So basically I had 3 days to decide if I was going to move to France with a boy that I really only met for a couple days. And I did. I did. That was 1980. It was 88. It was 88. So that was one of my crazy things in my life. I lived in Nice for a year.
Nice. I've been to Nice and biked around there.
Yeah, the cycling is not very good in Nice. You have to really get north. Like Lance Armstrong famously lived in the area, but all the great climbing is to the north. But at the time, I did have a bike. I remember riding to Monaco a couple times, which was beautiful. But
Monaco was nice.
Like, here's the thing: is he wasn't into cycling. He wasn't into fitness. So, long story short, it wasn't a match made in French heaven, but it was fun.
How long did you stay there?
I stayed there for a little less than a year. I went to school, and but while I'm going to back up a little bit. That summer when I did my bike tour around Europe, I was in Alsace. This is at the time I was with my friend. Her name was Jennifer as well. So we were Jennifer and Jennifer. So we introduced ourselves like that and people thought it was crazy. We were just riding, we were in Alsace and we came across a group of cyclists and they all had helmets on. Oh my God. Because remember, this is 1988 and the only people who wore helmets were Americans. And they also had flags on their bike. So they had these, that were about 5 feet in the air. So in the back, they stuck up. And so I said, oh, this must be one of those bike tours I've heard about. So we stopped and we talked to them. I talked to the guide and she said, yeah, it was for a bike tour company called Vermont Country Cyclists. And I'm from Vermont and we're just riding our bikes around. I said, oh my God, I want to do that. How do I do that? Look, I'm obviously a cyclist. I said, je parle français. And she said, well, we were just bought out by another company and I think they need guides. So she gave me the name. This is maybe a week before we're heading back. So I had started the process of bugging this company to hire me, but they didn't need anyone.
Right.
In that interim, I moved to France.
Okay.
And then I kept bugging them. I'm like, hey guys, my French is really good now. I mean,
French boyfriend,
French boyfriend, they
leaving
call it,
France,
you
going to
know.
school. It's the only way.
It really is. I went to the French as a second language program, but it was still all in French. And so I ended up that next year getting a job with this company called Travent. They had bought Vermont Country Cyclers, and they elevated from like 3-star tours to 4-star ultra luxury.
Okay.
Competing against Butterfield and Frog Robinson, you might have heard, is the Canadian company. So again, this is back in the 80s when this kind of whole thing was just getting started. And they flew me to France, and I started leading bike tours and staying at the most luxury hotels you could possibly imagine, and eating meals like you can't even
That's
imagine.
the only way to do it too. Like,
Well, I did eventually start, as you mentioned, doing my own tours. I worked for Travent for, 88 into the mid-90s. There was, the early 90s were a little rough. The economy bad. There was some war stuff going on. There was, and so they almost
folded.
Well, I think the whole industry had a real, like 92-ish. But then they came back. They were actually bought out by Vermont Bicycle Tours, VBT. So here we were, Travent guys were used to, and like I'm talking Provence, Burgundy, Loire Valley, Dordogne. Those were the areas I knew the best. Alsace. I did a couple tours in Switzerland. They were like the most luxury. And so like the next stage of the industry came in and started doing not so luxury tours, which I prefer, because
okay, good. You're like, oh, I don't know how I can do this.
I did one tour that was kind of promoted as an eating tour. It was a shorter one. It was 5 days. Most of them were 7 or 8 days.
Okay.
And it was 5 days at either a 1, 2, or 3-star hotel. I mean a restaurant. And if you know anything about Michelin-starred restaurants,
I don't.
Oh my God! Like 3 stars is at the top.
Okay. 3 stars at the top. Okay.
Is like, but we're talking the greatest in the world.
Right.
And great is sometimes
pretty open.
To get 3 stars in a Michelin-starred restaurant, you have to change your flowers every day, and it's not always the food, but the food is obviously pretty good. But each meal is 3 hours. So
I know, it's just like a sit down, God.
People just get so tired of it. And like, if you do 1 3-star restaurant in your lifetime, you feel like you had an amazing experience. But most of them were, actually a couple of them weren't starred, but they were still high level restaurants. But like in that particular tour, we had 2 nights at a 3-star, 1 night at a 1-star or 2-star, and then the other 2 at really nice restaurants that weren't quite starred. Like I probably gained 15 pounds.
Whoa.
Just on that. You're riding your bike, but these people weren't necessarily like strong cyclists.
I remember when I was in France, when I said I went there for a training camp. So I flew into Nice, and then the training camp was at it wasn't like a resort, but it was kind of like maybe a hotel where we had our own little.
The town?
No, I'd have to go look it up, but it was like on a hill. Because so like at the end of every ride, we just had to freaking climb up this hill. Oh my God. But we had our own little room. So everybody kind of had their own little apartment. And, but the supper at night was like this buffet, and we sat around. Just like, you think you're eating really well, but you're just like scarfing it in, eh? And I'm just like, oh my God. And breakfast too. Like,
well, here's the thing, is like over in Europe, especially in places
and they
where
eat
the
late.
Food culture, they eat late, not as late as Spain. Spain like eats at 11 o'clock at night.
Oh wow!
But it's crazy if you go to Spain. But for Americans who are used to eating at 6, they're 7:30, 8. That was late to them.
You're like hungry.
For a place where the food culture is so important, Americans don't realize. I encountered this a lot on my tours, where people would come in and not realize that this if we had a buffet, but normally we didn't have buffets, but a couple of the fancy places made a buffet that was amazing just for our group. Maybe we had 18 or 20 people in this group plus 3 guides. And there was always a first course. But these people would walk in and like, oh my God, this is great. And not know that this was going to be taken away. And then the main course was going to be brought out.
Yeah.
So we had to educate them. I remember on my bike tour in Europe having that problem. I got invited. No, actually, gosh, I'm getting ahead. I actually went to Europe in 1984, straight out of college with a girlfriend, Eurail pass, that kind of thing, no bikes involved.
Yeah.
And I remember getting invited, the two of us, young girls straight out of college, getting invited to dinner. We had met these Italian boys in Brussels. And they invited us over for dinner because they're staying with their friend in Brussels, a really beautiful apartment. And they had the most amazing spaghetti, right? It was awesome. Oh, it was so amazing. And some other things. And like, we ate so much of it. And they must have like looked at us going, oh my God, look at these girls eat.
You're like, you don't understand American food. This is really good.
But in Europe, and especially in Italian, the pasta is a course. Because after that, they had this big roast lamb or something that like,
oh, you're like,
by the time the dinner was served, we were so full. We couldn't eat another bite, but no one told us. And we made such fools of ourselves. I mean, we were so embarrassed, but that taught me early.
Let's have a little piece.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously we weren't like really fat or anything, but they were probably looking at us going, oh my God, how come these girls aren't fat if they're eating this much?
Because I'm not going to eat the rest afterwards.
Exactly. But anyway.
So the bike tours were a big part of your life before you got into Mad Dog Athletics?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because now you're in Europe touring, like in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Then I guess you came back.
After my year in France with Luc, I had decided I wanted to go to grad school. Okay. And I wanted to study something international, because now I had this just exposure to the world. And so I ended up going to grad school in Arizona. It's a school, at the time it was called the American Graduate School of International Management, Thunderbird campus. So if anyone's out there and you've ever heard of a T-Bird, I'm a T-Bird. It's a real
T-Bird. I think I remember seeing that campus.
It's an amazing school. It's now a part of ASU.
Okay.
And so I got a Master's of International Management. And in between, in the summers, I was still going over to Europe doing the bike tours. So it took me 2 years to get my degree, but I was still doing my bike tours over there. And then, long story short, I got a job offer after Thunderbird to go work for the Olympic Committee in Atlanta. So this is the Atlanta Olympics were 96. I moved to Atlanta to work with the Paralympic organizing committee in 93. So 3 years before the Olympics, but I was going to coordinate with the Olympics because I was involved with some of the in the logistics department. But I was trying to move to international relations, or something I could use my language, because I was planning where the ice machines were going to go, for God's sakes. But there was another boy involved with this. When I moved to Atlanta, I had a boyfriend who was supposed to move with me, who had told me he was going to move with me. And the night before I left, he says, nah, I'm not going to move. I'm not going to go. It's too hot. So I went to Atlanta, and he lived in Colorado, near Vail. And so that was my exposure to Vail. So I went to Atlanta with a broken heart, and I never got over it. And also the Olympics, the job didn't turn out to be I mean, had I stayed, I would have worked for the damn Olympics, right? I probably would have gotten a career in the Olympics, because a lot of people who work for the organizing committees then go work for, you know, the various, they make a whole life career out of this.
Yeah.
So I joke that I lived in Atlanta for 1 year, 3 days, 7 hours and 27 minutes.
Oh.
Because it just wasn't me. And I said, you know, I don't care if it's the Olympics. So I moved to Vail, ostensibly to get a job in the ski industry using, okay, I have a master's in international management. Every ski area has that has international clients, has an international department. And they all told me, because I would call them up and say, you know, how do I get a job in this? They said, well, you need to live here. We're not going to hire someone from Atlanta.
Right.
So that's what I did. And I moved to Vail. I didn't get a job in the international department right away. I interviewed at Vail, Breckenridge, Crested Butte, Aspen. Did I go to Winter Park? I think there was one more. At Steamboat, I think. And in the meantime, I worked at restaurants, I did massage, and I started personal training. I mean, that was like coming full circle back to my fitness, my exercise science degree.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was really the start of where I am now. So I kind of.
So you never left?
No, that was 1996. I've been in Vail since, actually 95 is when I moved here. Wait, 93? I lasted 94, because I started in Atlanta in 93 and then left in 94. So 2 years before the Olympics.
Oh, okay.
And so that's really how I got started here. As a personal trainer, I loved what I did. I loved working with cyclists. And I just started studying more as much as I could about coaching and training. Now, I raced mountain bikes at the time, but you know, I was just kind of a sport level local races. I never did anything more. So, you know, I did have a little bit into the racing. So I was more interested in not working with, you know, elite athletes or anything, but just the everyday person who wanted to get better and stronger. And so I remember the first day, it was 1996. And our manager came in and said, our group fitness director said, there's this new thing called spinning, and we're getting bikes this weekend, and all of you guys are signed up for the certification, like this weekend. So I went to the certification, the spinning certification, 1996. And first of all, I remember being very uncomfortable on the bike, but you know, not uncomfortable but just because
stationary bike. Yeah.
Stationary bike, and the saddles weren't that good. But again, a light bulb went off in my head. A switch went in my head, and I said, oh my God, this is amazing. I had been teaching step for a long time. I did step all the way through college. Down in Atlanta, I taught step. Step was my thing. Choreography.
Oh God.
I don't think I taught a step class after that, once I got hooked on the whole spinning thing. And then next year, 1997, or in late 96, I'd only been certified for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months. Spinning put out a call for presenters. Oh. And there was a 4-step interview process. Like first you had to submit, you know, an application and a resume. And then, you know, once you go through that, then you had to submit I think I had to do a telephone interview, or I had to submit a video of me riding, as well as standing in front of the video and saying why I want to be a spinning master instructor. And so I made it. I became a spinning master instructor in early 1997. And that was all she wrote. I loved it. And I traveled around the country and even to some other countries like Canada. I went to Jamaica, and I certified spinning instructors let's just clarify so people recognize, spinning was the first. It is a brand, right? So spinning has a little R and a circle around it. It's a registered trademark. And so I worked for the spinning company for 12 years. I presented at conferences. I wrote some of their workshops.
Yeah.
And I kind of, you know, became kind of popular at the conferences. I had several sessions that were always full. And I just, you know, it just empowered me to empower instructors, because my big thing with spinning, and I think this is what made me different from, because remember, I started spinning early. They had only been around a couple of years. So I started in 96. I think spinning Mad Dog Athletics launched in 1994. So 2 years earlier.
Okay.
When I started doing my sessions at the conference, like I was the first one, I really made them cycling specific.
And I like that. And that's what I loved about them.
And I think that's what attracted you to my sessions. And like, I wasn't for everybody, but the people who liked me were there because I was doing sessions. I was the first one to do a lactate threshold field test. Like, they did max heart rate. That's how they did it. And I didn't believe in max heart rate training, like max heart rate charts, like age, 220 minus age is your max heart rate. And you know, go to 75%. It's so, even back then it was dated and not necessarily based on solid science, or it's just, it had its place, but for training, it doesn't really have its place. So
well, if you need basics, it's,
you know, it's, yeah, but
the problem is that okay benchmark.
It's an okay benchmark if you're doing long sessions, long intervals. It's not a benchmark if you're doing short, high intensity intervals, because heart rate doesn't respond fast enough. Yeah. And also, people don't recognize that, you know, things like cardiac drift, your heart rate rises towards the end of a workout, especially if you're dehydrated. And then so many other things can affect heart rate outside of what you're doing. But this is pre-power, so we didn't have power. So I was the first to do lactate threshold field tests. I was the first to do pedal stroke drills in all of the spinning program.
Wow, the pedal stroke. I gravitated to those, like, because I did
a session called The Anatomy of the Pedal Stroke.
Yeah, so I probably still have the paperwork. And you know what? I have a binder full of Mad Dog course notes that I picked up at every session that I went to, and the ones that I wrote, I would bring them back and I would copy them for all of my instructors. I'm like, here's new material. I would go coach through some of them. I'm like, here's some more ideas for your classes on how, you know, different kind of drills. And I absolutely loved going there and gaining all that material and that information. And I still do a lot of that stuff to this date as a coach. And
it's so fun to learn, isn't it? I mean, like,
it is.
I teach this stuff and I still have to learn it. So
yeah, well, it's good reminders, right?
You may have gone to this class. I was the first at a spinning conference, or I think at any conference, because truly there were other fitness conferences, but the spinning conference was the only one that was built around the spinning experience, right? And then like some of the other programs that were growing, Schwinn, et cetera, they mostly just focused on their modality of training.
Or RPM.
Our RPM had at the time.
The Y had something, Good Life had something.
Yeah. So I was the first, and this is where kind of my two worlds will come together.
Yeah.
To do an indoor cycling session that was a simulation of a Tour de France stage. So I did a couple of them. The first one I did was because I'd ridden up Alpe d'Huez a couple times.
I think I have that sheet. Hold on, you just hold on here, just a second.
Yeah. Do you have the session outlines from
I'm
WSNC.
telling you, I still have some of the stuff. Mental training and approach to skills, weight loss, nutrition.
Right, but those are the official spinning continuing ed that they did.
Yeah.
The material from the conferences were always kind of different and exclusive, and you know, like my Alpe d'Huez ride didn't become a spinning continuing ed. It was only, you could only experience it. But like the way I did it was I actually simulated, I told a story of a rider who was a domestique, who had worked really, really, really hard all day, and he was exhausted, and he was towards the back. And, you know, he was a young rider, and he had only just been called up to the team because someone else got sick. And I mean, like, I had this whole elaborate story.
Yeah.
And it was the very end of the stage was Alpe d'Huez. So most of the ride was, I mean, the whole ride was just the last segment. The warm up was me prepping the story, and we're coming down the Galibier, and it's, you know, we're just pedaling. And but then the entire focus of my ride was that last 45 minutes on Alpe d'Huez. And
right.
I talked about the switchbacks. We stood up on the switchbacks. I had French music. I told stories about people cheering him on and say, allez, allez, pushing him, because when you're at the back, they don't care if they push you. And, you know, his whole worry was he was going to be the Lanterne Rouge, which is the very last rider. And he didn't want to be the Lanterne Rouge at his first Tour de France. And so he gets that. I had this most amazing song from the movie Moulin Rouge. It's from their soundtrack, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds, and that's the finish.
You guys had great music,
so
that you guys would offer too.
Yeah. So I think that particular ride kind of was one of my benchmark rides, and I did more Tour de France. I had another workshop called not a workshop, but just a session at the conference called the Suitcase of Courage, which was,
I remember that one.
It was later. I think it was, I did in 2008 and 9. I don't know if you went that year, but you know, that was one of Phil Liggett's famous phrases from his Tour de France announcing. And so that one wasn't a story of one rider. It was just the whole team working together, right. and fast and attacks. And we may be visited by the gray ghost.
Oh, hello, kitty.
He always makes an appearance if I'm on Skype.
Yeah, he's like, let me walk over your laptop and your keyboard.
By the way, since we're talking about France and Tour de France, I have 3 cats, and they are all named after French mountain passes.
Aw.
So this is Galibier, although we call him Gibby.
Yeah.
I have Isouard, who is Izzy, and
nice.
they're 11-ish, and then we have a 4-year-old little girl. Her name is Madeleine, for the Col de la Madeleine. So Maddie.
Oh, cool.
So even my French love is passed into my look at this tail.
Very nice. I know.
So that's my story.
So how did you end, like, because you've been with Mad Dog Athletics for a long time, and you left. So what prompted you to leave? Was it separation of ideas? You want to break out and do something?
Because I sweetheart, I have to go.
I know, it's just like, get off.
It was primarily because I realized that I had something to offer that was beyond what I could offer with the spinning program. And because I wanted to reach out to more than spinning instructors. And so I created I left spinning in 2009. I created the Indoor Cycling Association. And it is a online educational resource for indoor cycling, not just spinning. He's coming back. I'm going to have to lock the door because he's good. He's not going to leave me alone. An online educational resource for indoor cycling instructors, regardless of their certification, you know, for instructors who want to fill their classes and motivate their riders and have classes that are, here's the problem with the industry. You know, you've got the purist, the cyclist over here, and then you've got some of the, you know, boutique studios over here. It's just all about fun. I want to bridge that gap, right? Because, you know, you're a cyclist. When I do some of my true cycling training, I use Trainer Road, you use Zwift. Go away. It can be kind of boring if you expect everyone to sit in the saddle and do that for a long time. I can do it for myself. So for an indoor class, we need to add the element of inspiration, great music, and maybe getting in and out of the saddle a little bit more, although I certainly don't condone the up and down all the time, like some of them.
That's crazy.
That's what I did is the Indoor Cycling Association bridges that gap, and we create rides that are, so if my computer's moving, it's because the cat is behind it pushing it. So I should have locked him out. I should have known he was going to do this.
That's okay.
We teach instructors how to create rides, plus we provide rides that are based in science, that are based in proper cycling technique, but they also have the element of fun. We teach instructors how to use music to match the message of their profile, the purpose in the ride. So you're going to use different music if you're going to do more of an endurance class than than you would use for a you know, a HIIT class, you know, high intensity intervals, or hill climbing, you know. And I actually bring the element of teaching to the beat of the music because it's more fun. But if you're going to stay in the realm of cycling-based, science-based classes, you have to know how to do that properly, so that, you know, you're not pedaling at 120, 130 RPM. So yeah, that's what the Indoor Cycling Association is all about. This will be our 10th year.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah. So can anybody go to your website, like the cycling, Indoor Cycling Association?
Association.com.
What is it? What is it, Jen?
IndoorCyclingAssociation.com.
And they can get education or join classes, or how does it work if somebody wants to jump in?
It's a membership site. So we have members from all over the world. Before the pandemic, I had members from 32 countries. It's backed off a little bit now. We're going to boost it back up as you know, and people are starting to get back into classes. Yeah, so all over the world, people are members, and I have profiles, which is your class plan. And not only that, is I inspire instructors to learn how to create their own profiles, but I have so much content on how to motivate riders, right? How to use coaching, what kind of cues to use to motivate them, better communication, how to use your music, how to correct form, how to coach newer riders who are coming in, and if you have a balance of beginners and advanced people, how do you do that as a good coach, and how to coach older riders. My audience is a lot of older riders, not everyone now, but so, you know, they have some different needs. So our target is instructors who are already certified, because we're not a certifying agency, who want to learn more about how to do it effectively, safely, without gimmicks, but still have it be fun. So that's what the Indoor Cycling Association is all about.
Wow. So how many classes a week do you have in there?
Well, they're not so much classes, it's content for education.
Okay, excellent.
But I will say that I did, so over the pandemic, I started filming myself teaching some of my profiles as if, so they're not like virtual classes. I mean, it is because it's online, but I'm talking, it's a video and I'm talking to the instructor. Not as if I'm teaching the class. I'm like, okay, if you're going to teach this class, we're going to do some pedal stroke drills. Here's what you will do. Right. Or okay, I'm going to, like I recently did one called Where the Magic Happens. And it's a session on, and it's actually a whole webinar on how to inspire people to do a little more, to go outside of their comfort zone, because that's where the magic happens, right?
Right.
That's where you improve your fitness. That's where you improve your physiological adaptations, whatever it is you're trying to do.
Right.
Or maybe improve your cadence ranges.
Mm-hmm.
So I filmed myself teaching the session, and it's almost as if you're going to a conference to learn how to teach this session.
Right.
And a lot of people, sure, some people ride to it if they have a bike at home, but I do have a lot of people, just like at conferences, they don't ride the bike, they sit there and they take notes, right? Because that's a great way to learn. So I have a lot of those on ICA. I actually am going to start to do some live stream virtual classes, but I'll tell you why I'm late to the game. Because some people, excuse me, during the pandemic have been doing this since, March and April.
Yeah. I started doing that in March for fitness stuff.
For me, being in an association like this, I absolutely have to be careful about music rights, right? So
I know. Mm-hmm.
I can't be up there and have music blaring without paying the rights for it. So when I do the video classes that I was just telling you about for instructors, instructors are more likely to have Spotify, a premium Spotify.
Yeah.
So what I do for those is I send them the Spotify link. I'm on my bike. I say, line up your Spotify. I also, on some of them, had Apple Music.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I'd say, okay, everyone, 3, 2, 1, start.
Right.
And I'd tell them they'd have to have the same crossfade, a 10-second crossfade. Let me try this again. Bye-bye, Gibby. Hold on one sec. I'm going to shut the door since you walked out. All right.
Bye,
that
kitty.
way, people were playing their music from their own sources. So I wasn't, violating music rights there.
Yeah.
And if you just watched me in the video, I rode with headphones. I listened to the music here. All you would hear was my coaching. So the only problem with it is you need 2 devices, whether you're watching on the computer and then a second device for the music.
It's crazy. Even when you're on Swift, I'm like, how many things do I have to have going? Like at least 2 or 3. So
it is kind of crazy. Well, I've been researching the music rights, and I'm going to bite the bullet and actually purchase them. And it's not as expensive as I thought, but it's also not, the average instructor is probably not going to be able to afford it. But as an association, I'm going to do that. And in fact, afterwards.
Yeah, so you don't get dinged, and you don't get especially if you have like a YouTube channel or something, because then they won't play it.
If you're trying to do Facebook Lives, I don't know how people do it because they get cut off. But there's
I don't put music.
You don't do music to yours?
No, I just use what I do is I tried to. But the thing is that it gets cut off. And I did that with my spinning. I tried to upload it, but only certain parts would upload because of the music rights. So then when I do my Facebook Lives, my fitness stuff, I don't use any music. It's a hit class. I'm mostly coaching and talking anyways.
Which would work out fine for
and I'm like,
fitness,
people
but it
have
doesn't
their
work
own
out
stuff.
very well for on the bike. So the other option is for instructors to pay for like Yes Music or Power Music. It's royalty free, and but music is so special to me. Like I would have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours to find new songs, and they're all covers. And yes, they work fine for some, especially I think they work fine for some hit classes. But I do a lot of introspective rides. I do a lot of mind, body, mental connection, focusing on breath and pedal stroke. And those songs would work very well for that. So that's another reason what kept me from doing it. But like I said, I'm going to pay the rights and hopefully start up next week or the week after with my virtual rides. And I'm also going to do a winter training program.
You should.
For people who want to prepare for cycling season. It's probably, because it's already mid-January, I'm probably only going to do 8 weeks or 10 weeks instead of usually I do, you know, a 12-week one.
Yeah.
So
I've actually been doing a 16-week for like the last 15 years. So I started
is optimal, but I'm
and then a 12 and then an 8. So I offer those different time frames. They just basically jump into my 12-week that's already running. Yeah. And it's just to fill up spots.
Well, when you obviously want to test before and after, do an FTP.
Well, you know, it was easier back then, like, because I used to do it in studio. So we'd be on power bikes and it would be easy to set up zones and test before and afters. Now it's not so much. Like now, like what I've had to do, because people are on all sorts of trainers, all kinds of bikes, and we just use heart rate zones. And that's the only thing that I could, you know, with resting heart rate. So it's a little bit more specific. And that's the only way that I could figure out how everybody could get their own heart rate zones. So that, because it's all based on heart rate, and I understand like every, you know,
the limitations of it.
Yeah.
But I will be including heart rate. I think heart rate is still important.
Well, but when you have watts, like I'm like, you can decide to, when you have power, I just say you decide whether you want to watch your power meter or watch your heart rate. Like, don't pick, you have a choice. But for us right now, it's all heart rate because but not everybody
has a power meter.
Yeah. So, and cadence. So you have to have a heart rate monitor. You have to have a bike computer with the cadence. So you have to get that bundle, whatever it is. So we do a lot of cadence and heart rates, and those are the 2 gauges that we use in my course. And so it's 90 minutes a class.
Your audience are more likely to be cyclists on their road bikes. My audience,
we have hybrids, we have triathletes.
Yeah, as opposed to a spinning bike or a Schwinn or like I'm looking at I have a Stages bike over there.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anybody on a stationary bike. And
the sun is coming in here.
Oh, it looks good though. But you know, unless they had one in their house before.
Right. So my audience is going to be a little different. It'll be the opposite. I may have a few cyclists on their bike. I will probably have a people who use indoor cycling to train for outdoor riding. But probably a slightly different audience than you do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it is, and it's always been cyclists. Like, but the thing is that before now, we've always been on like Kaisers or Cyclops or anything that, you know, had power meters on them, which made it, what a change that was when they came out. Oh my gosh. Remember, Jen, so in the studio we had spin bikes, and then they upgraded. They had this really cool little monitor you could buy that would attach to the flywheel, something, there's a little thing, and it would measure cadence.
That was a big thing.
Oh my gosh, life changed right there. And then it just went gangbusters after that. But when I remember
started to plummet in price, that was the big thing. Because it used to cost $2,400, right?
Oh yeah, I remember getting one. Yeah, and I was the only studio who brought those in, and it was a game changer for instruction. Like, you didn't have to count out your cadence 1, 2, 3 for like 15 seconds. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And you could gauge distance, and
that's what I love. I mean, I've been doing this for so long, but I still love doing this. And so Indoor Cycling Association is my passion, but I'm going to recircle back to the whole bike tour thing.
I think you should, because even around your area, I know that Europe is
Well,
I know.
I'm a snob.
Okay.
No, I don't want to do a bike tour in Colorado.
Well, maybe a
I want
Canadian
to do a
like
bike
me
tour
would
in
like to
Berkeley.
do a bike tour in
I want to
Colorado.
go back to the Alps. I went on a bike tour as a client. Like, I could have done this on my own if I wanted to, but I had an opportunity to go on a bicycle tour in 2017. You're going to die. I don't know if you ever knew this. Do you know
No,
who Dan
what?
McDonough is? Dan McDonough?
No.
He used to be really big with RPM. I know he still works with them. I think he's actually working with Good Life now.
Yeah, they came
But
out with
he
stuff.
also, he worked with TRX for a long time. And as he was a master trainer for TRX, he was one of the IDEA trainers of the year. Like, he really, really was well known in the fitness industry. But when he was with TRX, he also had some good connections with some of the bike teams. Trek sent him to, I think it was Mallorca or somewhere, one of the training
Trek
camps.
is huge in Mallorca.
Yes, so he went, and this was, I think Lance Armstrong was still there. I hope,
do a
Dan,
Trek
if you
tour?
happen, no, I did a Dan McDonough tour, but before I tell you this,
okay.
Dan trained these guys, all of them, Jens Voigt, Frank Schleck, Andy Schleck.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember who else was there. Yes, this was like I think it was the last year of, maybe it was Discovery. I was after U.S. Postal was.
I remember the Schleck brothers.
Yes, so
racing together.
Dan got to be buddies with all these guys. And he was really good buddies with Jens Voigt. And he and one of his other cycling buddies, and then also he knows all the RPM people from all over the world, many of whom are like really, really strong cyclists and triathletes down in Australia, New Zealand. So he has been putting on tours with his team. They're called Rooster Cycling. And they raise money for really great causes. And so in 2017, he was going to the Italian Alps with Jens Voigt and Frank Schleck.
Whoa. Did you pay extra for that? Did you get on that one?
I did. Jeff and I, my husband and I, went to the Italian Alps. I will be honest with you, I think I was the least strong not the least, because I wasn't the last. But I was towards the end. Like, those guys were way up there.
Oh yeah.
And it was humbling for me. But I recognize this is often a lot of my clients when I go on bike tours who kind of like are bummed out that they're at the back. And here I was like bummed out that I was at the back, but I did it. Damn it. We did the Passo Gavia. We did the Mortirola, which is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Am I allowed to swear here?
Sure.
When I got to the top, I did a video of me, and I did like a Facebook Live. I said, that was the hardest motherfucking thing I've ever done in my life, but I can't believe I did it. Frank Schleck pushed me. Frank Schleck rode behind me for about a half a kilometer and pushed me towards the end.
I got his handprint on my back.
I know, and oh my God, he's such an amazingly nice guy, and Jens Voigt is so funny, and we just had the best time. We also did the Stelvio, which is famous for its 48 switchbacks, and that was one of my favorite rides, the Stelvio. So yes, I did the Italian Alps.
Whoa.
And I have oh God, if we're going long here, I hope people aren't bored, but I have a great story about that if I could.
All right, let's finish it up with this one.
Right. On the day of the Gavia was the last day. And, all of these are big mountain passes they use in the Giro, right? These are famous Giro climbs. And I was so fatigued. And, the night before we had kind of partied, stayed up. And,
yeah.
I mean, this was a partying group, let me tell you. And I don't know how they did it. Maybe it's my age or something. I don't know. But And my husband's a super strong rider, so he was usually up with them. So they assigned one of the bike tour guides to ride with me because I'm at the back of the Gavia. Oh. And I just remember I had just had God, the sun is really coming in, sorry. I had a really bad attitude that morning because I was tired and I was cranky. And I was like, fuck this, fuck that. Oh, goddamn. And the guide, who was so nice, I forget his name, he had a cute little Stefano or something, a cute little Italian name. And he was like, oh, but you all stayed up late last night. And I said, so did they. Right? They're all way, way ahead of me. And he's like, oh, but this is, your last day and you've been riding. I'm like, so did they. They did too. And like, everything he tried to console me with. And then this is a lesson I learned about attitude. I looked around and I said, I'm in Italy riding my bike up these beautiful mountains and I'm complaining.
Yeah, really, Jen.
And so like, I flipped that switch in my head. And I decided that, you know what? Who cares if I'm last?
You get a guided tour. I mean, I stop and take pictures.
My whole experience changed. You can change your experience. And this is something I teach a lot in my cycling classes. I'm going to move myself out of the sun here. Is that you can change your experience by just changing your attitude. And that's what I did on that ride. And it taught me so much. And I will tell you, I was not last. There were 2 other people who came in behind me. So I, for all that bitching, I actually, did okay. And what the heck? I climbed up the Gavia and I did the Stelvio the day before. And I did the Mortirolo the day before that. And I did that. We did another climb, huge, the longest climb, not as steep, but that went up and over into Switzerland. And who was I to complain? And it turned into a wonderful, wonderful day. Yeah. But it could have been awful, right? Because of my attitude. So anyway, there's a lesson for everyone.
I think that's a great lesson.
Just, check inside and say, look what I'm doing. Like, who cares if I'm going to be slow or who cares if I'm going to be last?
Take a look around.
Yeah.
I'm not at home. I'm on my bike. I've done some pretty epic things.
Even if you're not in Italy, you can do this at your home rides, right?
Oh yeah.
You can look around and say, what have I not noticed on this climb before?
Yeah.
I live in the mountains. I live in there's always beautiful and
there's always something, seasons change. Yeah. You see something different every time because you're always a different person. It's just like reading books, like the same book. Or listening to something like a podcast or a book and you're like, man, I don't even remember that paragraph like the first time. Like
exactly. So you have a lot more control.
Yeah.
So because of the pandemic easing up hopefully and vaccines, I am hoping to do another bike tour this summer.
Yes, this is exciting.
I just in Europe, and I'm a little hesitant because there's nothing worse than having to cancel. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I will have made a decision, set a date, deciding on I do like to go new places, but I think it'd be best if I just go back to some place I know really well, like Provence, and do Mont Ventoux, or go back to Alpe d'Huez and climb up Alpe d'Huez and maybe add some.
Well, you'll have a plethora of new cyclists who be probably very interested in doing stuff, rides like that.
Well, you can. I will certainly let you know, and you can let them know.
So make sure everybody you get. Oh, sorry, I'll just. No, you finish. What were you saying?
I was just. I was hoping when they were first talking about vaccines that I could plan for the Tour de France again, because I've done so many tours to the Tour de France. And I, know how the logistics of dealing with the tour, but I still think that's too early. July is going to be too early. And this year's tour is going to be amazing. I loved the route when they announced it, but, maybe in 2022, I'll do a Tour de France tour, but I think this year is probably going to be more in the fall. Because, more likely to have more people vaccinated. Europe will probably be, more open to have people. I don't know for sure, but I imagine you're going to have proof a vaccine in order to travel to Europe. That's what I'm thinking.
Let's not get into that, because I am non-believer of that. And
well,
to be restricted because you decide you didn't want, that might be a
yeah,
little
but you
bit...
can't help what another country does.
Oh,
right?
I know.
So I have a feeling it's going to go that route. So all that to say is I am just pushing my hopes for later in the summer to do some beautiful riding up mountains in France or Italy.
And to keep an eye on Jen's website, what is your touring website?
Since I stopped doing the organized tours, like officially some years ago, I haven't really maintained that website, but people.
But it's going to be updated.
Yeah.
And what is it?
There's nothing there now, so.
Okay, guys. So when you see something pop up on this, what is the website, Jen?
It is vivatravels.com.
Viva.
Viva.
Oh,
like Viva
I remember that. Yeah.
Vivatravels.com. I did self-guided tours for years. After the economy crashed in 2008, it was mostly self-guided tours I did. I sent people all over Europe because guided tours were too expensive, and actually preferred the self-guided tours for a while. But I love kind of like being in the spinning class. I love the camaraderie.
The group. I know. I need to get on one of those tours. A lot of my friends go to Mallorca and do the Trek tour because they're just really well done and very popular. But so everybody, make sure Jen, I'll have her website on the descriptions, and as well check out her Indoor Cycling Association website for the subscription to learn. Go there and learn. If you're a coach, a cycling instructor, maybe you're doing your own online classes and you need ideas, I'm assuming that's a place that they can get very specific, cycling specific things, which is
cycling specific,
which is hands down what
music.
You want.
Yes.
Because
how not to be a boring coach, a boring instructor.
This is not for the wheelhouses, those kind of, but there's a place for them too. Anyways, I'm not I'm not one of those big supporters, but because I am all about cycling. And when I went into the one, just as a lesson, when I went to one, I was like, I can't believe I got to be biking at 300 watts. Like, as the moment I sat down on my bikes, like up and down, up and down. I'm like, I haven't even warmed up yet.
Yeah, or pedaling at I went to a
ridiculous rate and doing push-ups, and I'm like,
I didn't do any of that stuff. But I just remember this instructor who said she was a racer. She raced criterions, which blew me away. But she stood at the class and said, turn your resistance all the way to the left and pedal as she had people like pushing 200 RPM with zero resistance. She told them, turn it all the way to the left. And like everyone around is bouncing so much, I could just see their joints like,
That's scary stuff.
It was so scary.
But, well, thank you so much. We're coming to the top of the hour, and it's been an extreme pleasure to have you as our guest. Oh, I thought you froze there for a second. Oh. As our guest, Jen. And thank you to our listeners for jumping in for another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, all things cycling. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well as the YouTube channel, because this goes up live there at the same time as the episode does on the podcast. So you want to have all your notifications on. And please, if you are, if you feel so kind, leave us a 5-star review or rating and a quick review, because we're looking to push this podcast straight to the top of the leaderboard.
Well, I will tell everyone
I know. There. Thank you. Fun, so. You better. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Thank you so much.